Ever since the release of the final chapter of Attack on Titan, people have been telling me to read Berserk. They were telling me how amazing and mature of a story it was and how it was something that I must experience. I had never touched Berserk, not one page, not one scene from any movie or episode, nothing. I had no idea what it was about, who the characters were, or even the setting. All I knew is that there was a guy with a cape and a big ass sword. Because of the ending of Attack on Titan, I was particularly against investing myself in another story, especially another story that does not and will not ever have an official ending due to the passing of the author of the story, Kentaro Mora. Rest in peace. But so many people just kept telling me, read Berserk, read Berserk, read Berserk, read Berserk. I would look into it on my own and just assume it was about some guy killing different demons every chapter, a genre known as Monster of the Week. I'm not much of a fan of Monster of the Week stories. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with them. I just personally don't enjoy them anywhere near as much as an entire cohesive narrative. But everyone assured me that Berserk was not a Monster of the Week manga, and I'll say for the most part they were correct. Though it does still have some of those elements riding in the passenger seat, the overarching story is always the driver of the story. At least that's what I would be saying if it wasn't for the Black Swordsman arc. The Black Swordsman arc was the worst part of Berserk for me. I did not enjoy much, if any, of it at all. The Monster of the Week vibes were through the roof, and Guts was not only an uninteresting character to me, but also really unlikable. This caused me to gravitate towards side characters like Puck, the fairy elf thing, who is a male in official canon, but a girl in mine. I found these characters much more interesting and endearing than the main character of the story, which was odd to me because usually in pretty much every story I like, the main character is always one, if not my favorite character, and I'm always the one confused why other people don't like the main character. It's really weird to finally be on the opposite side. But I thought maybe I'm just not supposed to like this guy right now. The story certainly doesn't seem to expect me to like him.
Don't touch me. I'll crush you.
What is with you?
It isn't until the end of the Black Swordsman arc where I finally see that there is more to this character than I originally thought, and more to this story as well. With the introduction of the God Hand and the story's main antagonist, Griffith. Needless to say, if it weren't for this change in the story, I would have probably dropped Berserk before long. It just wasn't for me at that time. But then everything changed. Immediately I was thrown into a story with a completely different tone. All of a sudden it went from Monster of the Week to Game of Thrones. Great and rich character writing, brutally painful scenes to watch, and above all, just an interesting story that was full of emotion, stakes, and drama. Obviously, I'm not talking about Game of Thrones Season 7 and Season 8 here. I'm talking about the good stuff, the Red Wedding. I couldn't stop reading as the story continued to surprise me at every turn, with more and more compelling characters being introduced like Gambino, Casca, and the Band of the Hawk. Up until I finally met Griffith. Knowing who Griffith will become makes seeing him before that all the more intriguing. The question the audience would have for this character if he were not introduced as a villain in the last arc would be a completely different question than it is right now. That said, I think I personally would have preferred not knowing. I would have personally preferred to start here. Now don't get me wrong, ticking time bomb stories can be great, but it takes away a lot of the suspense and shock at the same time. And some of the stuff that happens with Griffith, I can honestly say would have shocked me beyond belief had I not known they were coming. Plus the Black Swordsman arc was ass. Anywho, Griffith is easily one of the most interesting and compelling characters I've ever seen in manga. The way he behaves is just so pure and endearing, it's hard to explain. You just want to see him win. He has a goal, he wants to achieve it by any means necessary. And I don't know, man, I just respect people like that. Especially when they are actually competent and their goals pay off. I also like how Griffith actually cares for his soldiers, even a random kid whose name he didn't even know. Griffith's biggest flaw as a character, and when I say flaw here, I'm not talking writing flaws, so don't get upset, is that he can't handle giving up control. Whenever he feels he's out of control of a situation, he starts to beat himself up about it, and even goes as far as scratching his own skin off. This skin scratching was introduced when Casca reveals to Guts that Griffith got booty blasted in order to make money for the Hawks to avoid as many wars and deaths as possible. This was a great way to show how good of a character Griffith is, that he would give up control, the thing most valuable to him, in order to spare some of his soldiers from battle. It also did a great job at unveiling the complexities of the character and show that while he may come off as perfect, deep down he never will be because he's human. It's also a great visual and gets the point across to the reader immediately, which will lead the reader to thinking of it every time they see Griffith scratch his skin. It's just great stuff. Somehow, Mirror does this without a single internal monologue from Griffith until the end of the Golden Age. It's just masterclass writing, and I really don't know how he did it. Guts being forced to join the Band of the Hawks by way of losing a duel to Griffith causes him to finally find a place where he can fight and also have companionship. After all the horrors he went through as a child, I was extremely happy to see him around people who actually loved and respected him. As he fights with the Hawks, he quickly moves up in rank due to his skill and is pretty much second or third in command. He even gets his own army. Everyone in the Hawks seems to treat Guts like royalty except for one person, Casca. Casca was also a very good character to me. She came from nothing and, upon meeting Griffith, decided to pledge her sword and her life to him. She wants nothing more than to help Griffith achieve his goals by any means necessary, but Griffith's dream requires him to do things he may not want to do, and that includes marrying royalty, which means he can never truly be with Casca, even though I'd argue that he would have wanted to otherwise. It's tragic, and my favorite side character, Jadeo, points out that Casca loves Griffith so deeply and everyone knows it, so there's no way Griffith doesn't. But at the end of the day, Griffith's kingdom is what's most important to him. Even still, Guts constantly supports Casca and encourages her to never give up on her relationship with Griffith. I thought Guts and Casca's relationship was the best at this time. It felt the most authentic and organic when Guts was just trying to help her. I get it, they do relate a lot, but I think their relationship was way better when it was platonic, and I'll explain why. Guts and Casca start off on the wrong foot, and she hates him from the start. Part of it is obviously illogical and rooted in jealousy, as Griffith told Guts, "I want you," right before they had their first duel, and Casca was never told that by Griffith. I'm not quite sure why she took it so personally, considering Griffith clearly meant he wanted Guts for his army and not for romantic reasons. I understand that when Casca was recruited to the Hawks, Griffith said pretty much the opposite to her, but what did she expect? She was just a little girl who had never swung a sword. Obviously, Griffith wouldn't want her as much as someone like Guts, who was proven amazing on the battlefield. That said, she does have another reason for disliking Guts, and it's a reason she and I share. Guts is extremely selfish, and at sometimes unbearably so. I'll go into my feelings on him after, but first let's talk about Casca. Casca believes that Guts is selfish because he always charges in the battle head first without thinking about anyone but himself. In one specific instance against the Golden Age's first demon encounter, Zod, Guts nearly dies, and so does Griffith in trying to save him. Luckily for them, Zod just decided to leave because of plot. I know there's a reason, but its reason is literally the plot. Anyways, yeah, this moment was totally selfish on Guts' behalf, and even Guts appears to acknowledge it, but somehow some people didn't. People were telling me that Guts fighting Zod was actually selfless because he was doing it so Zod would stop, quote unquote, killing his friends. And I just don't see how they came to that conclusion. Yes, Guts originally appears to be doing it for his comrades, but first he makes a remark on how embarrassing it is for his army to be losing to one man, which he should know that something like that happening must mean that something is off, but I let him slide because he never saw a demon before, and at this point in the story, they had not been introduced yet in the Golden Age. But secondly, Zod already killed them all when he got there, and all he had to do at that point was retreat and regroup because obviously this guy is not a regular person. But what does he do? He immediately rushes in all alone with no strategy, exactly like Casca said. So yeah, Guts is behaving like a shonen protagonist in a seinen manga, and that's just one example of him being selfish. There are plenty more, but unfortunately Casca doesn't seem to hold a magnifying glass over those instances. So I will. After Griffith orders Guts to kill a man who attempted to have him killed, the man's innocent son comes to the room and Guts murders him too, but by accident. This causes him to be upset, and rightfully so. Mira made a great callback in this scene with Guts killing the boy looking exactly how Guts looked as a child when Gambino tried to kill him. Again, this is just great stuff, and I would have loved if this was the reason for Guts changing and wanting to be a better person, but no, it's not. I also want to talk about Guts killing the boy. A lot of people seem to think that Griffith set it up so that Guts would kill the boy, but I don't see how he possibly could have known that the boy would have walked in at the exact moments for Guts to accidentally stab him. Obviously, Griffith gains a lot from the boy Adonis being killed, but I just don't think that that was his initial plan. I think it was just like a happy coincidence, but I'll move on. The reason Guts wants to change and leave the Hawks is because of a speech Griffith makes without knowing Guts and Casca can hear it. Now let's break this speech down a bit, because I think not only Guts but some of the audience of the story takes this speech a little bit too seriously, and it's not their fault. Mira does highlight this speech many times and makes it a core centerpiece in the drama, so the speech itself has to be worthy of this type of gravity in the story, and honestly I don't think it is. But let me explain. First, the context. Griffith is having a private conversation with the princess, a woman who he has to marry to get what he wants by any means necessary. Already, we have to take everything he says here with a grain of salt, because the princess herself is obviously not someone Griffith is obligated to tell the truth to. Quite the contrary. It's 100% possible that Griffith could be saying these things to Charlotte the Chad in order to convince her to start thinking for herself instead of what her family wants. I mean, do I really need to explain why planting this seed in her mind is a good idea? But fine, if you want to disregard that and say that while that makes sense, it doesn't come off that way from the way Murr frames the speech, having Griffith stand in the distance, etc. And I might even say I agree there to an extent. Still, that doesn't disregard Griffith's actions. In my opinion, actions speak way, way louder than words, and I don't know about you, but if Griffith was willing to get booty blasted to protect his soldiers and throw his life away without hesitation to save Guts, I'd say that this requirement of his for a quote-unquote true friend is not really supported by Griffith's action. Unless Griffith's willing to die for just anybody. Griffith probably has no clue whether or not Guts has a dream or a goal. If he does, they certainly never had that conversation on screen, which means that either Griffith was willing to throw his entire life away for someone who wasn't his friend, or he was lying in his speech. Now, some say yes, he was lying, but not to manipulate Charlotte, but to himself? Because Griffith can't admit that he cares about people? Well, that's not true, because he literally admitted that he cares about people, and not even people he personally has a relationship with, which is more than can be said for our main characters, so I'm really confused here. The story has shown me everything I need to know about Griffith through his actions, and his words are blatantly contradicting those actions. I am either to assume that he was lying here, or I'd have to say the writing may be a bit off. But let's continue. Regardless of what Griffith said to Charlotte was a lie or not, Guts takes what Griffith says to heart. He believes he has to leave the Hawks to find his own dream so that he can be quote-unquote Griffith's equal. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but if you have to earn the right to be someone's equal by way of their requirements for doing so, you will never be their equal. Why does Guts allow Griffith to set the criteria for equality in this context? Especially since Griffith is someone he's known for years. Even if Guts found his own dream, he could then run into Griffith, and Griffith could just change the criteria for equality by saying something like, well, I'm not equal to people who would betray their friends and leave them. Or he could just pull an Aaron.
Let's forget about that.
What's more is, objectively speaking, and stated by the character that spits the most facts per dialogue in the story, Guts will never be equal to Griffith no matter what he does. And you know why? Because Griffith is an actual goal-oriented adult who does things he doesn't want to do in order to get further in life. He was willing to get booty blasted just to achieve his goals, while Guts isn't willing to stand in the dance hall for a few moments. Now, don't get me wrong, Guts is an amazing soldier, but there are dozens of amazing soldiers in this story and also in reality, but there are very few kings. Griffith has the making of a king. Guts does not. Guts lacks the patience and understanding a king needs, and I'm glad the characters and the story acknowledge this and give him an extremely abstract and I'd even say non-existent goal to leave the Hawks to quote-unquote find out who he is. Now, I'm not saying there's no such thing as going on a journey of self-realization. I've gone on one myself, and Will Smith is on one right now. But Guts doesn't really need to do this. Guts knows exactly who he is, and the story confirms this. He's just a guy who likes fighting and swinging his sword. I really don't understand why he had to leave the Hawks in order to figure this out. Ignore the fact that it's a bit selfish on his behalf. I let it slide because the story does acknowledge it later, but why in the world would he do this? Why leave everything and everyone who ever cared about him behind simply to find what he already knew? Guts even acknowledged that it's very unlikely that he and Griffith would ever be friends again with the way he left things. So Griffith's approval or friendship isn't even like an underlying reason or something like that. It just comes off as forced to me, and I wish Mura would have changed Guts' reasoning for leaving to something a bit more realistic. It would have made everything after his departure feel so much more grounded. But I'll be honest, it really took a relatively reasonable amount of gravity out of the drama for me. And then I projected that disappointment in the story that until then had been nearly perfect in my opinion onto Guts, and that wasn't fair. But you know what was fair? My hatred for him when he came back. No. Let's slow down. Before I can discuss how much I absolutely despise Guts as a person, we first need to talk about Griffith. So after Guts leaves, Griffith takes it pretty hard. He sneaks into Charlotte's chamber and bangs her. This was a careless move, and one of the ladies in the castle, not sure what you call those, Castleites? Yeah, one of the Castleites peeks through Charlotte's door hole and sees Griffith smashing. Now, wait a minute. Why is this bitch peeping through a door hole in the middle of the goddamn night? Is Charlotte actually being that loud when this is clearly supposed to be sneaky sex? Doesn't seem like it. I don't see any moaning SFX here. Maybe it was the banging on the headboard. Jeez, Griffith, you gotta chill, bro. Anyways, the bitch goes and tattletales to the king, and the king immediately has Griffith arrested and orders the murder of the rest of the band of the Hawks. While arrested, Griffith is tortured relentlessly for nearly a year. Guts finds out about what happened to the Hawks and immediately returns like I'm supposed to care. And then he explains to everyone who have been on their last legs on the run from the king that he finally found his reason for life. And his reason was to swing his sword, the thing he was doing already. Yay. After he comes to this epiphany, he joins random tournaments fighting extremely important side characters. My question is, why didn't he return to the Hawks immediately after discovering his true reason for life? Is it because he doesn't give a fuck about them? A lot of people try to claim that the Hawks falling apart was Griffith's own fault. Had he handled the fact that Guts left more maturely, nothing would have changed and he would have gotten his kingdom. While I do agree that Griffith shares some blame in his own downfall and easily the largest portion of that blame, there are others to blame here too. Yes, even Guts. Sometimes your actions have consequences, even if those consequences were the furthest thing from your intentions. Now, I do think that the story acknowledges this, especially when they finally save Griffith, with Guts shedding tears and getting angry. It's pretty clear to some extent that he blames himself for what happened to Griffith. The problem in this case is the audience. A lot of you guys seem to believe that Guts has absolutely no responsibility to take here, and it just baffles me. As an adult, you have to take responsibility for every action or inaction you decide to take, and the consequences for those actions as well. Did you guys not watch Spider-Man? If Spider-Man decides to go on a date with Mary Jane rather than stop a fire, yeah, it's not his fault the fire started and he's not to blame if anyone dies. But if someone does die, had he decided to help instead of go on that date, that person may be alive. That's just a fact. And in Berserk, if Guts hadn't left the way he did, then Griffith would have never slept with Charlotte, at least not in the way he did it. But okay, let's say you don't buy the Uncle Ben logic. You want to blame only Griffith since he's the one who started the metaphorical fire with his decision to bang Charlotte. Why do you not blame the bitch who told instead? I mean, if she had shut her fucking mouth, literally nothing would have happened, right? Why don't you blame the king for being a weirdo pedophile jealous of another man smashing his daughter to the point that he tortures him for years and attempts to kill his entire army that had absolutely nothing to do with it? Only Griffith is to blame? Odd. It seems as though many people have a predisposition to hate Griffith and blame him every time anything bad happens in the story, and I just don't share that sentiment. Even after everything that happened during the eclipse And don't worry, we're going to talk about that. I still can see that his downfall was a product of many moving parts and not just his own action in sleeping with Charlotte. So Griffith is held captive and boss girl Casca takes over and leads the Band of the Hawk to the best of her abilities, to the point of exhaustion. She is putting the band and Griffith's dream over herself, like the good person she is. It isn't until Guts comes back to where things start to take a turn for the worst. Now, I understand that I'm reading this back to back, but it was really jarring to see Guts return and have a 1-year time skip in just one chapter. I don't know, is it just me? I feel like there needed to be a few more chapters to make the time skip feel more realistic, but I digress. Casca at first ignores the fuck out of Guts, which is what everyone should be doing because fuck him, right? But they quickly come to an understanding as Casca attempts suicide. Now wait a goddamn minute. I can agree with wanting to die, then spend one more moment around Guts, but this just seems a bit dramatic. She could have tried to kill herself any time before now. She knows damn well Guts is not capable of taking her spot, and she knows damn well that he is not about to let her actually kill herself right in front of him. So why do this? It just seemed weird to me. And then immediately after they're all lovey-dovey, I get it. Casca is extremely stressed and probably mentally defeated at this point. So why would you decide to have this moment now? Not only is it weird that Guts will want to have sex with Casca immediately after her attempted suicide and knowing that her mind is not in the right place, it's also weird because Guts knows how Casca feels about Griffith, not him. There was never a time where Guts came to understand how Casca felt about him before now. The audience knows, but Guts doesn't. And shouldn't he be like a little surprised by this, at least? It's almost like he expects it. And also, most importantly, what about Griffith? He's literally being tortured right now, and you guys are frolicking in the woods like Adam and Eve. I know you don't have all the intel yet or whatever, but can you find a better use of your time than this? Like, I don't know, sleeping? Casca? Ain't you tired? Then we get this scene where Guts tries to choke Casca and PTSD from his childhood experience, and I don't know, man, this just fell flat to me. People say I'm a speed reader, and maybe that's true, but I felt nothing in this forest scene. It felt completely unnecessary and made both Guts and even Casca feel less like characters and more like props, just doing what the author wants them to do at the time. A lot of the authenticity that I love Golden Age for just seems completely gone in this scene. And then Guts says it. He says he wants to leave the fucking Hawks again. Why? Before, he at least had a reason. A stupid one, but a reason. Now he has absolutely no reason. He just doesn't want to fucking be here anymore. And what's worse is he wants to take Casca too? Hello? Griffith is still rotting in a cave. Can you at least save him first and see if he's even alive before saying shit like this? I know he says he wants to free Griffith and then rebuild the Hawks before leaving, but the fact that he's even thinking about leaving yet is just really shitty, dude. What's more is, even if Griffith is saved and perfectly healthy, which he fucking isn't, but let's say he is, the king is still literally hunting the Hawks, and once he finds out Griffith is freed, his hate boner will only grow ever harder. Don't you think staying with the people that need you would be, I don't know, kind of a cool thing to do? They are your friends, right? Doesn't fucking seem like it. And what's worse is Casca seems to actually be considering it. Casca, no! Don't let this fucking asshole ruin you too. So they finally go to save Griffith with a small group infiltrating the kingdom. The spy is proven to be Charlotte the Chad, who wants to free Griffith and then run away with him. But Casca doesn't want that. Now hold on, Casca. You dare be jealous? Did you not just pop that pussy for Guts in the woods? Did you forget about that? Then they have this love triangle shit with Guts getting salty at Casca for being jealous and Casca trying to make Guts feel better by grabbing his cape and remember when I said their relationship was way better when it was platonic? Well, yeah. Then we finally get to the point where Griffith is saved. Murray did a great job with this moment for sure. Firstly, I never expected Griffith to look like this, and cutting out his tongue was a really smart move, not just for the story, but also for the torturer guy, because Griffith probably would have talked his way out of here if he had a tongue. That man is really good with words. Anyways, because his tongue is missing, it requires Griffith to use his body and facial expressions to explain his state of mind, which are much less defined than actual words, obviously. He even has his helmet on, which, while cruel, allows most of his face to be hidden, multiplying this effect. A great example is when he immediately tries to grab Guts' neck to choke him, which is not only amazing foreshadowing, but also something that's hard to catch, and I would have missed it had someone not pointed it out to me. This is another reason why I think I would have enjoyed Golden Age so much more had I not known Griffith would become Finto. I never would have saw this coming, but going back to look, the signs were there. But Griffith isn't all evil. You can see he cares for Casca and Guts and the others, especially Charlotte, when they are trying to escape the castle with him. After they finally escape, they realize that Griffith will never be able to lead them again, and the demon makes that clear if they were in denial. This destroys Griffith's spirit even further, with the final straw being Casca talking to Guts right next to Griffith. He's mute, not deaf, guys. Jeez, have some decency. She tells him she can't leave because he needs her, but really it just makes Griffith feel like that much more of a burden. So he tries to run away from them as Guts gives chase. He falls into the water, attempts suicide but can't commit, then laughs hysterically. This is the moment where Griffith is at his absolute lowest. He has nothing left, not even the will to take his own life. And then the Behemoth returns to him. The blood from his arms flow down to it as it makes the face that I interpret was the face he was making on the inside at that moment, and the eclipse begins. I don't really know if my words can do this moment of the story justice. It's easily one of the best payoffs in any story I've ever read, not just manga. The art is superb, the stakes are high, but more importantly, there is real tension. Even though I know what Griffith will choose, it's very engaging seeing him mentally go through his options. I love the fact that he actually thinks about it and doesn't know if he wants to kill them all or not. Even after everything he'd been through, even at his absolute lowest, he still thinks about it, and that really makes the moment where he decides hit so much harder. I really wish I didn't know what his decision was going to be, though. So Griffith sacrifices everyone, one by one. They all die, and Guts and Casca are the last survivors. I really didn't have a problem with any of the deaths. They all seemed fitting except for Judeo. As I said earlier, Judeo is my favorite side character, and I really did not like the way that he came out and said that he loved Casca. I mean, does everyone love Casca? Does no one have a platonic relationship with this girl? I didn't really like that. I wish he would have said that he looked up to Casca like a big sister, or wanted to be like her, or was proud of her, anything else than romantic. Like, seriously. Everyone wants to fuck Casca, bro. Like, come on. But other than that, it was great. So after everyone else is dead, Guts and Casca are the last survivors. Knowing how Guts felt about Casca, Griffith again uses sex as a way of regaining his control like he did with Charlotte, and begins mercilessly raping Casca while forcing Guts to watch as he loses his arm and his eye. This moment alone is absolutely horrifying and, as the God Hands say, pure evil. It's indefensible what Griffith does here, but part of me thinks that this scene was soured by the forced sex scene. I think this moment would have been so much more impactful had Guts and Casca never had an intimate relationship and Guts had to watch the woman he secretly loved get violated in front of him. It's still impactful, don't get me wrong, but take the forced sex scene away and I think it's much better for it. That said, I still love the eclipse. And as the Deus Ex Skeleton Man appears to save Guts and Casca, Griffith considers stopping them, but then allows them to leave, yet again adding more nuance to his character. After retreating and finding solace in the home of a blacksmith that taught Guts that his dream was to fight, Guts does the absolute most terrible thing he did in the story so far, aside from using his child as a shield, and that was trying to have sex with Casca. Now, people try to defend this scene, and to be honest, I can't respect that. For one, Casca is mentally destroyed to the point where she is licking soup from a bowl. Yeah, if you ever see a grown adult unironically eating soup like this, please do not try to have sex with them. That's pretty lame, and it's not a good look. But Saint, it's not sex, he's just kissing her. Well, if that was the case, even then, it's a little far, but I highly doubt that's all he was doing here. I mean, look at this, man. This doesn't look like all he wants is a kiss. But Saint, he's mentally messed up from the eclipse too. Okay, and Griffith was mentally messed up from the year of being tortured and his mental torture of his so-called friends abandoning him. That doesn't excuse any of his actions, and neither does it excuse Guts's. But Saint, he stopped himself. No, he didn't. She stopped him by running away and screaming. Had she not done that, he wouldn't have stopped. Up until this point, I thought Guts cared about no one but himself and Casca, but now I see it's no one but himself. I get that the cave keeps demons out somehow, but Casca can't leave it, so she's literally in a cell. Guts said himself that she was slowly getting better, but I guess it was too slow for him, so he just leaves her. Like, what? I mean, he's literally leaving her alone in a cave for what I understand to be 2 years. He even fucks a demon for no reason, too. I know you guys are going to say, it's a succubus and he has to have sex with it to kill it. That's not true. You're coping. That's not true. He does not have to have sex with the demon to kill it. There's no way you could tell me that that is the case. It's no logical reason. He could just swing his sword at it like he did every other demon. Stop it. Why couldn't he kill a few demons and then come back and be with her and rinse and repeat? Maybe being gone for a day or two, maybe even a week. Wouldn't that work? Why does he think these demons are across the galaxy? Didn't he get teleported to them? It's perfectly feasible that he could find them and come back much more consistently than once every 2 years. As far as I see it, he either doesn't care about Casca or Mura has made some serious errors with this character. I understand that Guts is supposed to be an unlikable character akin to Breaking Bad's Walter White or Death Note's Light Yagami, but there's a limit to how much of an asshole a character can be before you just stop caring about them and their success, and to me, Guts has passed that threshold quite some time ago. So, all in all, the Golden Age was certainly amazing. I think I was a bit taken aback by the awe that I have for the Eclipse when I hastily gave it a 10 out of 10. After writing all this and really thinking about it, I'm feeling closer to a 9 out of 10. It's still very good, even with my gripes, and I had an excellent time with it. Some say Berserk falls off after Golden Age, and I really hope that's not the case, but if it is, I can definitely say the Golden Age was worth it, and it was an experience I'll never forget. Thanks for watching.